Welcome to the NBA DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts. I'm going to help you walk through today's slate for Tuesday, February 13th. The goal is to look at each game, highlight the best plays for each team, and take a look at each game environment, and also take a look at player projections and projected ownership. Obviously, it is pretty early in the day. It's 12:38 Central Time, so a lot of news could come in and completely ruin the slate and devalue a lot of what I'm going to say. But I still think there is value in looking at each game and kind of going over the most likely scenarios and mapping out which plays look the best. I would also very much recommend using some kind of lineup optimizer. My personal process is I establish some core plays that I like, and then I run a lineup optimizer like DFS Hero is, DFS Hero here, and that you see pictured on the screen. And then I see how that matches up with what I am liking before I get into the slate. And then I make my own necessary tweaks to the point where I get, a lineup that is looking, close to being optimal, but also gets different. Because the last thing you want to do is dupe and have a duplicate lineup with somebody else at the top of a GPP or something. So yesterday was a good day for me. Highlighted a lot of good plays. Mentioned Torrey Craig in my Reddit post. Mentioned Ayo Dosunmu. Mentioned Wemby and Luka. I mean, just a lot of good plays. I had a really good night myself, and hopefully you did too. And hopefully we can keep that going into tonight's slate. So like I said, this DFS Hero Optimizer was helpful in my process, and I hope it can be for you too. Right now you can actually get a 15% off discount when you sign up with them with our link that is at the bottom of this video in the video description. So I would take advantage of that if I were you. This is a really fun 6-game slate. So it should be interesting. A few landmine games, so to speak, based off of spreads, but a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. There's 2 really, really healthy game totals that will be interesting. But yeah, we should go over each game individually and see where we stand. So right away, we have Boston and Brooklyn. Boston is on the road. They are 9-point home favorites. The big news to monitor for the Celtics would be Porzingis is questionable. So if we take a look at how Boston plays out when Porzingis is off the floor, Derek White and Jason Tatum get the biggest usage boost. Tatum is going to dominate that no matter what. He has a 33% usage rate when Porzingis is off the floor. Jaylen Brown is right behind him at 29, and third for the Celtics is Derek White. So while you can look at guys like Drew Holiday and Al Horford as cheaper options here, and Horford does get a boost in general because he's going to have more playing time if Porzingis is out. Those guys have lower usage rates and are not as safe of plays. But yeah, I mean, Tatum looks great up top, 9.5K, almost 50-point projection, 26% boom rating at DFS Hero, and he's got the best matchup for Boston in this spot. So I really like him here. I don't know if I feel compelled to play him given the point spread. This has blowout written all over it, but he looks really good. If Porzingis is out, Jaylen Brown looks really good at 7.7, and then Al Horford could provide some value at 5.2. Like I said, Derek White is not the first guy you think of here if a big man like Porzingis takes a seat, but Derek White gets a nice usage bump, and he also averages 3.5 DK points more per game in those scenarios. So he looks really good at 6.3. I would start up top with Tatum probably, but Boston in general, they're in a good spot, and Porzingis being out would open things up quite a bit. If Porzingis is in, I think they're less of a priority because just when these teams that are stacked like this are at full strength, it's just you have to get lucky as far as picking the right guy, and then Horford would not be quite as appealing at 5.2K if Porzingis is in too. All right, over to the Brooklyn side we go. This is a bit of a mess. I mean, all their guys are reasonably priced, starting with Mikal Bridges at 7.4K. He and Cam Thomas are getting plenty of minutes. They're soaking up most of the usage for the Nets. If somebody's going to pop off in the scoring column, it's going to be one of them. Good luck picking which one. And by the way, they don't project well in this spot. The Nets only project for 109 points as a team. And the Celtics are just a nightmare matchup defensively. Obviously, there's blowout risk, but even if the game doesn't blow out, it's just not fun to go up against Boston. And I don't typically target DFS players in brutal matchups like that. At their price points, Bridges and Cam are totally fine, but I'm not really looking to them. Nick Claxton's a good price at 6.9K, but it's not a good spot at all. I think if Porzingis is out, it's not as formidable, but it's still not great. Ben Simmons is 5'9" and still on a minutes limit. I think he's maxing out like 5.2, or I'm sorry, 22 minutes right now. So that's not very tempting to me at all. Dennis Schroeder is coming off the bench at the moment. We'll see if that changes at any point. But in his Nets debut, he was actually pretty good. Let's see here. Just double check what he did. Did a solid 38 fantasy points, 15 points, and 12 assists in 27 minutes off the bench. Obviously, that's not really a sustainable expectation for him, but he is only 4.8K on a smaller slate like this that is devoid of locked-in value. Dennis Schroeder should be on our radar. I'll note Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis Smith Jr. also are getting minutes, while Lonnie Walker appears to be out of the rotation for the most part. So nobody really stands out except for Schroeder here for me. The other guys are playable, but the matchup stinks, so I will not be going there. All right, moving to the next game, we have a not so exciting matchup between the Thunder and the Magic. In some regard, it is exciting. I mean, the Thunder are a good team. Let's see, has Orlando turned it around here? The Magic, yeah. I mean, the Magic are still leading the Southeast Division in the Eastern Conference. They're 29-24. They're 6-4 in the last 10. I mean, they're looking okay. But this is not really a good DFS matchup at all. Both these teams are very, very good defensively, and the Magic are a slower-paced team. I don't think that means you can't target guys here, but this doesn't feel like a stackable game and doesn't feel like a priority for me. That being said, SGA is always in play, and his price has come down to 10.3. He's coming in with a 52.55 projection at DFS Hero. He's not carrying much ownership due to the matchup and environment, but he does have a 23% boom rating. So if SGA is not going to be owned, you can fire up SGA. I mean, he's a great tourney play by the looks of it. And the last time he faced the Magic, matchup be damned, he had 63 fantasy points and 37 real points. So we all know this by now. SGA can ball. It's pretty arguable that he's not expensive enough for the ceiling he can bring to the table. And he has a really high floor, too. So the guy averages 1.47 minutes or 1.47 fantasy points per minute. So if he's out there, he's doing stuff. Chet at 7.4 is totally fine. Again, not a great matchup. His projection doesn't blow me away. He's a fine play for tourneys, but not somebody I'm looking to get to. Jalen Williams at 7K is priced about right. Decent projection, but again, not a good spot. Giddey's minutes are all over the place, so not really looking there. And Dort at 4.3K is the last guy I would consider out of this bunch. It's okay value based on the minutes and, if it gets hot as a scorer. But I usually like to play Dort in like a smash spot, like against the Hornets or the Pacers or the Hawks or something. And then, you just roll the dice on Dort, firing off, hitting a bunch of threes and doing well. He's cheap enough to consider and keep in your player pool, but I don't like him as a whole for the slate. Moving over to the Magic side, Banchero stands out with a 41-point fantasy projection on the night. He and Franz Wagner are both carrying some ownership. They both have boom ratings north of 20%. OKC does have a top 10 pace, but they are not a bad defensive team, so I don't really feel like these guys are priorities. I will note that Franz Wagner has been playing out of his mind, which is always nice. In his last two games, he has 49 and 58 fantasy points. A lot of that's coming from the scoring column, 36 and 34 points. And then 4 games ago, he had 38 points. So he is feeling it as a scorer. So at 7.1, yeah, you can play Franz Wagner. That's totally fine. Pure tourney play, would not play him in cash games. The price is good. The matchup and projections not. So he's not really calling to me. And if Franz Wagner is going to be north of 20% owned, that's going to be a fade for me. He's probably going to populate when you're running your lineup optimizer, and he's going to stand out a little bit, and that's fine. And if you get to him and stay on him, that's cool too. But I will be looking to pivot or pay down or pay up in those spots. Wendell Carter at 5.3 is just okay. It's not really an amazing matchup, but he's pretty cheap, and there's not a lot of amazing value on the slate. So far, Jalen Suggs, Markelle Fultz, totally fine at their price points, but I'm not racing to go get them. Lastly, Cole Anthony and Jonathan Isaac are really cheap. There is some blow-up potential here just because OKC is the better team. And Isaac and Anthony are historically pretty good fantasy point per minutes guys, but they're not exactly reliable. So overall, the guy I'd probably go to is Wagner, but I'm not really prioritizing the Magic on the slate, and I really don't love this game as a whole. All right, next up we got the Bucks hosting the Heat. The Bucks played last night. There is nobody on the injury report except for Chris Middleton, who remains out for Milwaukee. But it is the second leg of a back-to-back, so I would definitely monitor that situation. You could easily see Giannis or Dame or, somebody else, like a long-tooth guy in Brook Lopez taking a seat. That has not been reported from what I have seen, but it's not impossible to see it happen. On the other side, there's a lot of injury news that has already been cemented for the Miami Heat. They're coming in without Jimmy Butler, Terry Rozier, and Josh Richardson, and Duncan Robinson is questionable. So starting on the Heat side here, it is a decent total. The spread's a little bit scary. Obviously, they don't have two really important players for this game, so a blowout is very possible. I will note, too, the Bucks had been struggling, but they smoked the Hornets, and then last night they smoked the Nuggets. So not only are they clicking offensively right now, but their defense in the last two games, small sample size, but the last two games, they've looked very, very tough defensively. So could that continue at home against an undermanned Heat team? Absolutely it could. So that is a little bit scary, but I don't really see a way around really good Miami plays on a slate this small. Bam stands out at 8.3K. He's got the best projection for Miami, 26% boom rating. The best play for the Heat, though, because you don't have to pay all the way up to 8.3 to get him, is Tyler Hero at 6.9K. 30% boom rating. Projects pretty nicely. He's going to carry a lot of ownership, but to me, this feels like good chalk. A little bit of blowout risk, a little bit of unknown as far as like, is this suddenly a good Bucks defense now? I don't know. I don't really care. I'm just going to eat that chalk and move along. How your night goes may hinge on what you do with the rest of the Miami chalk. Are you paying up and eating the Bam chalk at 23+% ownership? If Duncan Robinson is in, are you playing 40% owned Duncan Robinson? At 4.2K, I mean, I almost hope he's out because then the other guys look and feel a lot better. But if he's in and people actually are going to play 40% Duncan Robinson, I might fade that because, I mean, talk about a shooting-dependent player. If he's not hitting his shots, Duncan Robinson can fail miserably in a hurry. I will note that in the vacuum, he is a good play. He's cheap. 29% boom rating, and historically on the year, the Bucks have not been a bad matchup at all. So he is in play. Just keep an eye on if he's going to be playing. Let's see, Jaime Jaquez. I could be butchering his name. I think that's how you say his name. 4.5K looks really good. He's playable even if Duncan is in. I love him if Duncan is out. I don't really care the chalk wise. He just is a better. He just does more than Duncan does on average. So he stands out for me. Caleb Martin at 5K is still playable. I would probably prefer Duncan Robinson to be out to really fall in love with him here, but he's totally fine at 5K. He's definitely in my player pool. Haywood Highsmith, maybe if Duncan's out, he could be interesting. And then Kevin Love is the backup 5 here at 3.6K is totally viable in your player pool. He's garnering a lot of ownership. I mean, he's only playing about 15 minutes per game. I don't really know if that's going to change that much if Duncan is in. If Duncan is out, they could mess with the lineups, and maybe he sees more run. But, he is a good points per minute guy. So Love at 3.6K is not a bad play at all. On the other side, you got the Bucks. Giannis looks great again. I talked yesterday about if Giannis is going to be unowned, let's consider playing Giannis. And he was pretty low owned or very low owned yesterday, and he absolutely smashed. So there's blowout risk here. He's not cheap. Miami traditionally defends him well and is not exactly the softest matchup inside. Bam is still there. Even though Jimmy's not there, it's not exactly an easy spot. There are other good plays up top to pivot to. So it's still Giannis. He's got a really good projection, relative to the slate. And he's coming in unowned again. So if he is going to be completely ignored for the second slate in a row, I will once again very much consider Giannis in my lineups. Dame at 8.9 looks totally fine. Doesn't really feel like a priority, but I don't have a problem if you get to him. And nobody else really stands out except for maybe Jay Crowder. His price has come up to 4.8. He's been a bust as a value the last 2 slates that he was on. But in theory, he'd still be looking at, 30 plus minutes in the role he's been having. So assuming that doesn't fall apart completely, I still think Jay Crowder is viable. We'll note AJ Green is starting to get minutes, so he could be looking at 15 to 20 minutes, and he's only 3.5K. I don't really love it, but again, the value is not just dripping all over this slate right now, so he is somebody we can at least consider. Moving on to perhaps the game of the night. The Kings visit the Suns. The Suns are 5-point home favorites. This game has a very healthy 244.5 total, so it's definitely one that is stackable. And the funny thing is, a lot of these options might not be super chalky because a lot of the ownership is flocking to Miami and a couple of other spots. So if that's going to be the case, the Suns and Kings start looking very interesting. Sabonis projects for just a few less fantasy points than Giannis does. He is going to be a lot more owned, but he does have a 30% boom rating, and I'm not really that afraid of Nurkic down low. He's not a priority for me because I like other guys better on this slate, but Sabonis is totally cool, totally fine. De'Aaron Fox is too cheap at 8K flat. Projects decently, 23% boom rating. He's going to carry some ownership, and rightfully so. He is a nice mid-range guy there. He would be a nice kind of a little bit of a pivot away from somebody like Franz Wagner, who's 7.1. Just go spend 900 more for a guy who's a little bit less owned. Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, they're okay. They all, Monk is going to carry some ownership. His price came up a little bit, so I probably wouldn't go there at almost 24% owned. Keegan Murray at 5.1 looks pretty appealing as a value play on this slate. But yeah, that probably does it for me on the Kings side. Let me just check real quick what Trey Lyles has been up to, because he's only 4K flat. I mean, he's still getting like 20, 25 minutes. So yeah, Trey Lyles at 4K. Yeah, I like Trey Lyles. Unless some awesome value opens up, I think we can look to the Kings here for some value. In particular, the guys that maybe aren't going to be super owned. So if Monk is going to be 24%, let's just hope Kevin Huerter gets more minutes and gets hot here. At 5.1K, cheaper, way lower owned, plenty viable, or just go down and get Lyles, who currently is not getting any ownership. On the other side, of course, are the Suns. They look good as usual with KD and Devin Booker up top. KD pushing for 50 fantasy points and not that much ownership, so he looks really interesting. But to me, the play here is going to be Devin Booker at basically no ownership. His projection is not that much lower than KD's. It's a pretty good matchup for him. Great DFS environment. He's 16% boom rate. He's not really standing out, but sometimes you have to project a guy who's kind of just been doing okay, and he's heading for a big game. So at 9.7K, he's not going to be owned. We know Devin Booker has a ceiling. I think he's an interesting GPP play. Brad Beal at 7.3 and Nurkic at 7 are just totally fine plays, but not priorities for me. And then you can look at Grayson Allen or Eric Gordon if you want to hope that they get hot, but they do not stand out. All right, next game we have the Timberwolves in Portland taking on the Blazers. Minnesota is almost a 9-point favorite on the road. They look to be at full strength. Let me double check and see they're all in. Yeah, I saw a questionable tag from Mike Conley somewhere. Maybe that was like at FanDuel or something. But so far, I have not seen that anywhere else. They did play last night, so there's always the chance the old Riley Conley takes a seat. If so, that would open up a lot more minutes for Monte Morris. There's blow risk here, so I kind of like Monte Morris at 3 flat anyways. Nah looks inviting. Kyle Anderson, but especially Naz Reid. Naz Reid is the safest value and the most appealing value maybe on the board so far, besides the Miami guys. Really interested in the Miami punts here. Mike Conley, if he plays at 5 flat, he looks fine. Ant, Rudy, Cat, like usual, they look good. They all project decently. Ant runs away with the best projection. He's still only 8.5K. 23% boom rating is not going to bring in a lot of ownership, so he looks pretty good. If this game stays close, Anthony Edwards could be a bit of a slate breaker here. On the other side, the Blazers are appealing if this game stays close, just because Anthony Simons is a high usage player and he's only 8.2K. Same with Jeremy Grant at 7.8. DeAndre Ayton, I feel, has been playing like just gobs of minutes lately. Let me see. He is 7-3 at 39 and 37 minutes over his last 2 games, 35 minutes 4 games before that, and he's been crushing. In 3 out of his last 4 games, he has 40-plus fantasy points, and he has 49 and 53 fantasy points in his last 2 games. To be fair, he wasn't facing Minnesota in those games. So he has to run up against Rudy Gobert and Cat, and that's not very inviting at all. He has not faced them yet this year, though, so who knows? Maybe he'll come out and beast out. I'm not really that interested in him at 7.3K in this matchup, though. That is like the ultimate GPP, hope and a prayer play, though, because he is going to be completely unknown. He does not project well, and he's not cheap. So not very interested in that. We could look at some Blazers value here if you want to play for the blowout. I don't really love doing that, but it's not without logic. Scoot Henderson is questionable. Let me double check how the Blazers do when these guys are all out. I had this up. Okay, here we go. Well, Simons just really shoots through the roof when Malcolm Brogdon, Scoot Henderson, and Shaedon Sharpe are out. So like I said, Simons and also Grant, they look awesome. Nobody else is really popping in that instance for the Blazers. Yeah. So I would mostly just be looking at Simons or Grant if you're hoping this game stays close, but I really don't think it will. Moving on to the last game of the night, the Pistons and the Lakers. Right away when I looked at this slate this morning, I was like, oh, Pistons and Lakers, let's stack it up. The only problem is both Anthony Davis and LeBron James are questionable, and this game has a 10.5-point spread. Pistons are road favorites, as they should be. Worth noting, though, I mean, the Pistons have been playing better as of late, and they're healthier. They made some trades, and they have more of a full lineup. Let's just check. I mean, yeah, they've been in their last 2 games. They've been playing pretty close games lately, putting up some points in a few of them too. So, I mean, and by the way, the Lakers are not stalwarts. The Lakers are 2 games above 500 on the year. They give up 117 points per game. See where the defensive efficiency. Middle of the pack, 16th in the league. So, I mean, this is not a bad spot for the Pistons. Obviously, it's a smash spot for the Lakers, but this is a very, very stackable game. So I mentioned Miami as a spot where ownership may flock. This is the other spot, big time, and rightfully so. But I will just note before I get into this game, if this spot's going to be crazy high owned, then the Kings Suns spot looks pretty appealing. But if this spot is not going to be owned, this could be a good game to stack because that spread might scare people away. All right, so starting on the Pistons side, Cade Cunningham looks great. 7.8K is too cheap. He has a nice 41-point projection, 27% boom rating at DFS Hero. I mean, the Lakers ranked 22nd against point guards. I got nothing bad to say here. The only thing that would deter me whatsoever is the spread, and that there might be better, cheaper options even on his own team. But like I said, if you end up stacking this game, who cares? Just play them all, right? Jalen Duren at 7.1 looks awesome. Obviously, the brow down low isn't the softest matchup in the world, but he projects well, and he's got a 27% boom rating. He's too cheap, in my opinion. Same with Jaden Ivey, 6.7K. He's been playing a crap ton. I mean, he's been balling. Let's go check out what he's been doing lately. 23, 26, 37 real points. The only downside with him is he doesn't always bring you a whole lot with his scoring, and he's not always a very efficient scorer, but he's been feeling it. He is playing very well at the moment, and the Pistons are kind of all in on Duren, Cade, and Ivy at the moment. So I have no reason to go away from him. Azar Thompson at 4.9 is a pretty good value. Marcus Sasser also looks like a good value at 4.4. I mean, he only played 14 minutes last game, and they brought in Simone Fontecchio, who played 32 minutes and put up 35 fantasy points in his Pistons debut. So is he coming in and playing like the Bojan Bogdanovic role? Yeah, maybe. So that is a little bit troubling. One other guy I will point out is Troy Brown, who played 19 minutes for Detroit in his last game. So, yeah, if we get 20 minutes of 3K flat Troy Brown, I guess we have to consider Troy Brown. I don't like it at all because Troy Brown historically is not a very good fantasy points per minute guy. On the year, 0.8. Not terrible, but I don't know. He's fine. He's fine. You can play Troy Brown if we feel good about him being, sticking in the rotation, getting minutes. I would rather not stretch myself so thin in the value department. I'd rather take a shot on Azar Thompson or the Heat guys or some of the other values I already pointed out. For the most part, here is the big three here, and they're not coming in with crazy high ownership, but they will not be unowned either. On the other side, last team of the night is the Lake Show. Anthony Davis and LeBron James both look really good if they're in. I have a lean towards Anthony Davis. He's $500 more than LeBron, but he's worth it. He's got a higher upside. He's got a higher boom rating. And they're splitting, ownership in that price range. So I don't see any real reason to go with LeBron there. D'Lo at 7.3 and Austin Reeves at 7 are too expensive if both these guys are in. They look like really good plays if LeBron is out, and especially if LeBron and AD are out. As for value, the Lakers do have some pretty good value pieces here. Rui Hachimura is getting decent run lately. Let me just check what his minutes have been. 37 and 38 in his last 2 games. I mean, he can go either way, though. 2 games ago, he had 38 minutes and 8 fantasy points. Like, disgusting. And then last game, he had 37 points and 31 fantasy points. So who are you going to get on any given slate with Rui? I don't know. But he's absolutely in play at 4.7K. And then Taurean Prince, his minutes have been fluctuating, so I would probably not really go towards him at 4.2. I will note also Spencer Dinwiddie at 5K is set to make his Lakers debut. We don't know what that's going to mean. I would imagine he cuts into, maybe D'Lo or Austin Reeves minutes a little bit here. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to play him at 5K in his first game because we have no idea what his role is going to be. All right, so that does it for the game-by-game breakdown. Real quick, let's look at the projections for ownership. As things stand, Duncan Robinson is coming in as the chalkiest play of the slate. And that feels great, doesn't it? Yeah, not at all. I mean, he does have a 29% boom rating. The Bucks have not been a bad matchup. He is cheap, and a bunch of Miami guys are dead. So, yeah, he's fine. You can play him. But if he's going to be crazy owned, I might just pivot to Jaime Jaquez or to somebody else around that price range and just fade that crazy ownership and hope he busts. Because boy, oh boy, can Duncan Robinson bust. But if you're playing a ton of lineups, I would definitely get exposure to him. I'm not going to do a full fade of him. I shouldn't have said fade. I would just go underweight on 40% ownership. Hero is good chalk, in my opinion. Really good price, really good roll. I like Jaquez. Jonathan Isaac chalk at 3.4K. Historically, he is a good points per minute guy, but that feels not good. Malik Monk at that price coming up, also chalky. Might steer away from him too. But the unfortunate reality is it is not a slate with a lot of comfortable chalk. Yesterday, there was a lot of chalk that I absolutely loved. And I went to, Trey Mann, Torrey Craig, Ayo Dosunmu. There's a lot of guys that just stood out. I was like, yeah, totally. Let's go get those and then run a bunch of variations in the lineup and let's see what happens. This slate, it's not as comfortable. Let's also look at our boom ratings. Who are we building our lineups around? Double down on Tyler Hero here. I'm okay with Sabonis, but I'm probably looking right here at Anthony Davis as my number 1 play on the board. I like to do single entry lineups, so I'm probably going to start there with Hero and Brow. I'm probably going to eat at least one other Miami chalk piece, maybe 2, depending how I feel about it. And then I'll get like a Pistons run back or 2 with Davis, and we'll see where it gets us. And one last thing real quick, we'll see what the DFS Hero Optimizer pushes out immediately. So like I said, it likes Hero, Duncan Robinson, Ivy, Duran, Jaquez. I'm totally fine with all that. Where I might differentiate a little bit is if Sabonis is going to be owned and Franz Wagner is going to be owned and Jonathan Isaac is going to be owned, I might pay down from Wagner or pay down from Wagner, pay up from Isaac, and then pivot from Sabonis to Anthony Davis. I do still like the Suns and Kings game, but if this Lakers-Pistons game is not going to be like super chalky, I might just end there with 3 or 4 options and hope that that game can stay close. All right, so that does it for me. Remember, you can utilize this tool yourself, the DFS Hero Lineup Optimizer. Click the link below this video for a 15% discount. And hopefully they can help you piece your lineups together tonight. And also, if this video helps you at all, give this video a like, and also subscribe to our channel, the DFS Build, so you can get alerted for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and good luck.